Karmen Trzupek's about to come up and speak to us about a new portal that you can join, and she's going to explain what it is, why it's important, and how it's different from other registries. So by way of introduction, Karmen Trzupek is the Senior Director of Scientific Programs at Global Genes, and in this role, she is responsible for developing collaborative programs and partnerships that maximize the RareX data platform to advance rare disease understanding and support the development of much needed treatments. By background and training, Karmen is a clinical genetic counselor. She received her graduate degree from Northwestern University and has worked in both academia and telemedicine. In her last role, she directed clinical trial services at InformedDNA, providing patient support, genetic testing, and clinical trial screening for patients impacted by rare disorders. Welcome, Karmen.
Hi, everybody. So I'm going to first start by telling you a little bit about who is Global Genes, who is RareX, and what is the DREAMS portal. I think there's a little bit of confusion of those. Oh, you can't hear me because I think I forgot to turn it on. Yeah. Better? Yeah, how about it? That's very loud. Okay, better. So there's some confusion about who is Global Genes, who is RareX, and what is the DREAMS portal. So I'm going to start by just explaining those. Global Genes, many of you probably are familiar with Global Genes. Global Genes has been around for a long time, almost 2 decades, as an umbrella patient advocacy organization for the rare disease community. And RareX is the research platform of Global Genes. So RareX is a research platform that really got started entirely from the rare disease patient community. So many patient advocacy organizations and rare disease patient advocates were finding that they had a registry or they were working on developing a registry. And if they had a registry, it was usually like very beneficial for some reasons. But what they were looking for was something a little bit more research robust, something where some of the surveys and the data that was being collected is kind of a next generation level data set that would be widely available to researchers. But what they were finding is that when they would go out and search for that, either it was wildly expensive and not something that rare disease community could afford to custom build, or it wouldn't be owned by the community or the patients. It might be owned by a biopharmaceutical company that was sponsoring a study, or it might be owned by the academic medical center and make it a little bit difficult to share as widely as they wanted. So that's really the genesis of RareX, and I think it's important to say that just because that answers a lot of questions about where does the data go and how is it shared. It's really a patient-owned, patient-led platform where we get lots of input from the community in how it's designed. And yet, as you'll see, it's all very research structured. Each individual patient owns their data and tells us how they want their data shared. So if you come into the portal and you tell us, I want my data shared widely for any qualified researcher, that's what will happen. Some people say, like, I don't want health economics outcomes research done, something like that makes me uncomfortable, or I don't want it shared with commercial entities. Very few people in the rare disease community choose that because most people recognize that our partnerships with industry are really important for the development of therapies. But ultimately, it's all the participants' decision. I don't need to go through this in detail, but we do currently support hundreds of patient advocacy organizations with thousands of patients enrolled. So the DREAMS portal is a study that is hosted on the RareX platform. It is a study that is focused on disorders of hypersomnia. It is community-driven, patient-owned, and I'll describe some of these research surveys that we use. If you go to the Sleep Consortium website, if you've been there, you'll see this big pop-up, and you've seen this logo probably here on a couple of signs. So you can either sign up here or directly through the RareX site if you're first getting signed up. So big picture, we have several goals with this study, and these are big goals, right? So our goals include improving knowledge and understanding of hypersomnia in and for the medical community, decreasing the time to diagnosis, and accelerating the development of better therapies and treatment options. So how are we going to do that? When we talk about improving knowledge and understanding of hypersomnia, the platform is primarily, not entirely, and I'll show you that. It is primarily from survey data. The surveys are patient-reported, what's called clinical outcome assessment measures. So many, if not most of you, have probably undergone or taken some surveys like the Epworth. So you've taken some of these research grade surveys that are standardized surveys that you show up year over year, and if you take them, it's the same survey. And if you show up at a different clinic across the country, it's the same survey because it's been standardized and validated in the community. So the types of surveys that we have on the platform, that's what we use. We use these validated research grade surveys. That provides a baseline for comparison. If you think about like following individuals over time before certain treatments or a treatment trial and after, that's really, really valuable to have that data really standardized. That data gives us details on symptoms, age of onset of symptoms, severity of those symptoms, impact to daily life. And it also gives us recognition of coexisting symptoms patient by patient. When we think about decreasing the time to diagnosis, we are really looking at integrating data from the patient experience from these surveys with data from sleep reports. So this is one of the things that we can do within this platform that is kind of that next gen step up, which is taking in sleep reports, getting that data curated and getting that data out for researchers who are accessing the data. And then when we talk about accelerating the development of better therapies, this is all through partnerships with biopharma companies and with academic centers that are developing therapies as well. So this is very, very much a large partnership effort. We at RareX are not developing therapies, but our goal is to really make data available on a patient level. So it's de-identified, but patient level. And often the kind of data that gets shared widely, the kind of patient data that gets shared is what's called aggregate data, right? So someone has done the analysis and they've said, well, in this particular population, 32% have sleep apnea. That doesn't allow someone later looking at that data to be able to say, well, of those patients with sleep apnea, what percentage of them had onset prior to this age, right? You can't go back and do that analysis if all you have is the aggregate data. So the data we make available is de-identified, but it is at a patient level, so all those analyses can be done. Okay, so what are some of the symptoms and impacts to life that we are currently assessing on this platform? These are the symptoms and impacts to life that were prioritized by an expert working group that we pulled together that was composed of a mix of clinical sleep experts, as well as patient advocates and representatives from industry who all get together and talked about like what are the most important symptoms and the most important impacts to daily life that we want to make sure that we're really capturing in this robust research way. And then for each of those, we did a big landscaping assessment of what are those research grade surveys that are out there, what is being used most. If it's being used most frequently, is that a good thing or is that just a historical, everybody keeps using it? So there's this whole hashing out process that happens. And then the final surveys for each of these were chosen. In the end, and I'll tell you about the two that are in red. But in the end, there were 7 surveys that were chosen for adults and 6 for children. Most people aren't going to get all of them because it uses branching logic to only assign you what's applicable to you based on the symptoms that you've reported. So the green ones are patient-reported surveys that were chosen, and the ones in red, long periods of sleep and obstructive sleep apnea, are things that we're primarily going to be getting that data through curated sleep reports. Brain fog, just following the talk that you just heard, is obviously really, really critical. And feedback that we've heard from the community so far is that we're just not getting it right. We're not capturing what really needs to be captured. We had an amazing focus group yesterday afternoon, and thank you to everybody who came for that and like really generously shared their stories. We are using that to help us really think through and design what's the best way to collect data on brain fog, which is obviously sorely needed. So this is just a snapshot of what it would look like in the dashboard in the Dreams portal. Once you are in there and you've signed the consent and indicated that you have a hypersomnia disorder, you can see that most of the surveys are very short. So kind of the idea behind it is once you get through the initial sign-up process, you could decide, you know what, I'm going to spend 10 minutes on this every Saturday morning until I'm done. It's going to be like my quick little thing. You can just chunk it up however you want. So I talked about sleep reports. There are lots of different types of clinical sleep testing. So we now can accept those reports that you upload. That can be a PDF. That can be something, usually you can get a PDF like out of MyChart, right? So if you log into your MyChart, you can download a PDF. You own that. You can share it with whoever you want. So you can upload that. We have a curation team that's going to curate the data out of that for research. So that could be a hypersomnia report. That could be an MSLT. I always get that backwards. MSLT. That could be a CPAP compliance report, as well as some laboratory testing. So if you've had HLA testing or hypocretin levels done, any of that can be uploaded. And there we go. And so when you go to documents, it's super easy to do. You just upload it and you can just label it as a sleep report. It doesn't matter what kind. We'll take it from there. Okay, so I want to go ahead and show you some of the data that we have so far. I think it's always valuable to kind of see what your efforts are teaching us and showing us. The numbers are not yet, our total enrollment numbers and survey numbers aren't quite yet what it is for the registry that was discussed earlier. So we'll get there. We're definitely growing, but there's some really cool data coming out. So in demographics, we currently have 157 people enrolled. You can see if you look at the first pie chart, if you start with the bright green right at the top, that's individuals under the age of 18. So right now, I think it's important to say to any parents in the room of someone with one of these disorders under the age of 18, like, yes, this is a place for you to put data. Absolutely, it's really critical to do. We don't have very many of those yet, but our expert working group, the clinical advisory group, really spent a lot of time talking about what are the most meaningful kind of research surveys for the pediatric population. And so it's all built out for that. The yellow is 18 to 30. The largest chunk is 30 to 50. So I think this is very common in this type of research broadly. That's like a common age group that you tend to get a lot of participation from. And then the red is 50 to 70, and the blue at the top is over 70. I think this, when I first saw the numbers on the breakdown on gender, I thought, really? Like, come on, 74% women? Like, we can do better than that because yes, there are more women than men impacted, particularly by idiopathic hypersomnia, but not to this degree. But then, there's the data earlier from the registry. And so this is maybe getting better. Like, we're on the right trend of welcoming the guys to be part of this. So hopefully we continue that trend. So The hypersomnia diagnoses, when we look at these, so currently about 2/3 of people indicate that they have a clinical diagnosis of idiopathic hypersomnia. About 27% total have narcolepsy, which is more type 1 than type 2, as you would expect. We do have a larger percentage of the narcolepsy population that is male in comparison to the total population, which is, again, not a surprise. If we look at age at symptoms and time to diagnosis, I think this is really, really important, the time to diagnosis in particular. So the bars represent numbers of patients by age categories, right? So if you look at like age at first symptoms, the most common responses that we get are somewhere between like 11 and 25 or 30, age at first symptoms. But the average time to diagnosis is almost 16 years. That is way too long. That's criminally long. So we have to do better than this. And one of the ways that we believe we can do better than this is by taking the patient-reported data side by side with these clinical reports so that we can understand, oh, in individuals who ended up eventually with this diagnosis, what did their clinical sleep testing look like prior to that? Like, let's start looking at a lot of that data, and what can that help us to learn about what that earlier picture is. When we look at co-occurring sleep symptoms, sleep inertia is very, very common, right? So this sort of sleep grogginess in the morning, this real, like, very significant difficulty sort of getting up and getting going. Sleep apnea is quite prevalent. This is very prevalent in comparison to the average population, to just the regular US population, especially when you look at age. Like in the US population, the older you get, the more likely you are to develop sleep apnea, but 43% is actually really high, particularly given that most people in our data set are under the age of 50. Insomnia occurs in about 1/3, and then cataplexy in just under 1/3. The Epworth, so it's interesting. The Epworth is kind of the gold standard for assessing daytime sleepiness in clinic and to a degree in clinical trials. And in fact, actually, this is a really great example of how over time the FDA and other regulatory agencies have really begun to take patient-reported outcomes very, very seriously. In conditions where it's very difficult to get clinical testing that shows like a very, very obvious diagnosis, it is becoming more and more clear that patient-reported outcomes can become a really critical piece of the diagnosis and of following people over time. And so when you look at this, perhaps not surprisingly, if you look at the bottom one, lying down to rest in the afternoon. So the question is, you all probably heard this, how likely are you to doze off or to fall asleep in the following situations, in contrast to just feeling tired? So lying down to rest in the afternoon, most people would say like, yes, I am more likely. And by the way, the numbers at the bottom are sheer numbers who have completed this survey to date. So it's a total of 100%, right? So probably I should have changed the numbering at the bottom. So that was a little bit more obvious on the percentage. But essentially, the vast majority of people say, yes, I am going to doze off or fall asleep in that situation. I think we should all be grateful that in a car while stopped in traffic is the least likely. But, if you look at this overall, like most of these are more than half of people say, yes, I am pretty likely to fall asleep in these situations. So this is really important data for us to collect longitudinally, knowing that it's also used in clinical trials very frequently. When we look at the impact of daytime sleep, and I will tell you that I haven't had an opportunity to try to dive into this in comparison to medication, though I think that's a really important thing for us to start looking at. What is the impact of your daytime sleep attacks? That doesn't take into account like, well, now that I'm on medication and it is helping me with my daytime sleepiness, I have some, but it's not impacting my life to a huge degree. So I'll just say that we really need to dive into this piece a little bit. But essentially, if you look at the sort of teal and red combined in the two, it's like just over half say that the impact, the disruption to their lives, either to their work, their school, their social and family life, is important or very important. So, even with medications available, this is a really important impact. Okay, so what's next? What's next for us, in addition to enrollment, perhaps I should have said that first, like getting more people to participate is really, really critical here. We also, so the curated sleep data is something that's brand new. We've been working on developing this. We've been working on it in collaboration with our clinical advisors in developing the curation process. So that is like brand new that we just added that functionality and we'll be working on. And then we've been talking to a couple of different companies about the potential to include some digital wearable technology data. So our hope is that in the next year, we will also have a sub-study that we can invite some people into where we can start to get some of that data, because that would be pretty great to have side by side in this way that all of that data can be really deeply analyzed on a patient level. Okay, so getting started. So if you haven't gotten started yet, there's the QR code for the sign up and login. There's also a session this afternoon that is a very, very hands-on session where you can just come and you can get started and we'll just sit together and kind of communally get going together. And then I think I went faster than I expected to do. That's okay. I helped you guys get back on track. And then I want to thank you to our partners. It's pretty obvious when you look at this list that this is a very, very collaborative effort. There's a real need to collect this like very rich research grade data to make sure that it's in the hands of patients, to make sure that it's getting shared really broadly to advance research. So thank you to all of these partners.